When it comes to football and football fans, Bangladesh is unique. A few years ago, we looked at why a majority of Bangladeshis went out of their way to support Brazil and Argentina in the World Cups. But that's only half the story. From supporting the most decorated footballing nations in the continent to being influenced by the late 90s spread of the biggest football clubs. This is the other side of the coin of how Bangladeshis fell in love with the European side of football. The 90s was a time when Bangladesh was just becoming an adult, politically active, culturally aware, and still finding its feet in the world. This was also a generation that was molded by the 80s glory days of domestic football, so the love for the game was quite literally in the DNA. While television sets were already popular in the country, the early 90s saw an exponential rise of colored televisions and Western media consumption. That changed the game for a whole new generation of soon-to-be football addicts in the country.
Support of Germany kind of began from 1990, which was kind of the first World Cup that I barely remember. So I was not that old then, and I was a kid, and I was really watching sort of along with my family and friends as as the World Cup was being relayed on BTV back in the day. And one thing that stood out for me was actually the German jersey at that time, which is actually ironically the same jersey that I'm wearing now. I don't know if you can see. So that's actually where kind of this actually journey started. I think from a very small jersey and a mama who pressured me into it.
The 70s and the 80s football lovers of Bangladesh had already sworn their allegiance to Brazil and Argentina. But the 1990 World Cup saw West Germany be the finalists for 3 World Cups in a row. In addition, they went on to win that year, which saw a rise in Bangladeshi football fans supporting Germany through to the next World Cup. And between the 2 World Cups, the football fans got their fix through a special TV show. If you speak to a lot of football fans growing up in the 90s, they'll cite this specific TV show that dictated the love for the game. America's global approach to the World Cup brought an even wider following of the game for this generation. By the time World Cup 1994 aired on BTV, a lot of Bangladeshis fell in love with the men in blue, especially with one man in particular.
And the highlight of that World Cup was Roberto Baggio. Because Roberto Baggio was everything, and Italy was just too cool at that time. Nicest jersey, the best looking players, the most stylish team, and of course the style of play, obviously. During the 1994 World Cup, I was about 12 years old. So at that time, that was the first time I actually followed that World Cup. And I still remember that was the first and probably the only time I actually cried.
Culturally at the time, at least in Dhaka, sporting events were a unifying factor for a lot of households and neighborhoods. Many families would gather to watch a big game. This had a major impact on the societal importance of football for that generation.
So it was a big event. We were watching it I can visualize it. We were watching it in a little room, all of us together, glued to the TV. And of course, that was a big moment. And, when Baresi and Baggio missed the penalties, both of them missed it, as far as I remember. So those moments, they actually stick with you forever. So that was one moment from 1994 that is still in my mind.
But if we think of a period that had the most cultural football significance, it would have to be the year 1998. This point in time could literally be the inflection point of football consumerism. We've got the FIFA 98, the France 98 World Cup, brands with the football collectibles, Footix, which was modeled after a chicken, is now imprinted in the minds of an entire generation of football fans. But more importantly, this was also the period when European major leagues started expanding their TV rights globally. Matches were available to watch for all at convenient times and with local context. And by this period, we have a newer generation of football fans for whom club football in itself was a brand new concept. And the fact that the first time a World Cup was hosted in Asia in 2002 helped the case for this new wave of fans in Bangladesh. Right after that was a fairy tale for year 2004, only to be followed by a European team, Italy, winning the World Cup in Germany in 2006.
While in the World Cup, I would find myself inherently supporting Brazil because, the hype and everything inside my house would be like that. So I'm like, I'm a Brazilian fan. But at the same time, deep inside, personally, I was always a Portuguese. specifically, I remember Euro 2004 was something very big for me. I was like wholeheartedly going and following and everything. So, and runners up Portugal. So that was like a very exciting part.
And following that event was Spain's Euro 2008 triumph that started this series of major international trophies, including their World Cup victory in 2010, with Spain's heavy Real and Barca cohorts meant Spain became the flavor of the town for a while. But there's one thing that separated this newer generation of football fans with all the ones that came before them.
An online network called Internet.
The Internet is a system of thousands.
Finally, your internet is ready.
The start of the century saw these new football lovers take to the fields themselves, but they built communities of like-minded football fans through forums, blogs, and the earliest social media platforms. This is probably the first generation of football fans who quite literally breathed, ate, and slept football. From jerseys to the football boots to watching goal to a new installment of FIFA every year. The rising popularity of fantasy football at this time also meant that many Bangladeshi football fans, including the casual ones, were paying a lot more attention to football in England than anywhere else. And all the football celebrity culture started with the likes of David Beckham and company back in the early 2000s. The rise of social media usage meant that football fans can now keep up with their favorite footballers like never before.
Individuals transcending the game even, right? Like I think that's an interesting one because it's part of an evolution of culture that we're seeing right in front of our eyes. And it's only possible because you have these mass mediums of direct-to-consumer communication like Instagram, or Facebook or Snapchat available to you that you never had before. Like previously, the only way for a player to make himself or herself heard to their fans was through using a traditional media channel or their club.
The biggest European stars play for the best European teams, and fans following their club heroes sometimes flock to the nation they belong to for international support. Take Belgium for example. The likes of De Bruyne, Hazard, Kompany, Lukaku, and so on have given birth to a new generation of Belgian fans. This was unthinkable at the turn of the century. It's also difficult to overlook the declining overall star power of Brazil and Argentina and the drop in the national team's performances over the years. For example, the last 4 World Cups have been won by European teams. And on top, if we look at FIFA 5 Pro Team of the Year selections over the last decade, the signs are even clearer. The South Americans were in the 11 a total of 35 times in the last 10 years. Whereas the Europeans were there 83 times. That's almost thrice as many times as the South Americans. So with all this, are we finally seeing the end of the Brazil-Argentina stronghold in the country? Over the last few years, we've asked planting followers about their country of support, and we've also done some extensive research beyond our following. The results and the trends line showed that there is a chance that in the near future, the Brazil-Argentina combination may no longer be the most supported teams in Bangladesh. Now don't get us wrong, we're not saying that South American teams will not have any support, and of course things might change in the future, but it's clear that a shift is taking place in the nation's psyche in front of our very eyes, and it won't be long before we see Bangladeshi supporters going for colors that are well beyond the few known ones. Hopefully sometime soon, the green and red will also be in the mix. But for now, it's everyone else.
Hello and welcome to this friendly game between Bangladesh and Argentina.